and welcome to Quarter Time Podcast. I'm Lucy G.
And I'm Lucy P.
And we're here to bring you all the netball goodness you never knew you needed.
Welcome to episode 8. Another round is done and dusted. Can you believe we've had 8 rounds of the Super League? Time is absolutely flying and the games are getting better and better each round.
Without a doubt, and you just love to see it. Coming up on today's show, we've got our cheeky little summaries of all the matches. Then we're taking a deep dive into the games of the round as well as our players of the round. We're then going to be looking at one of the key talking points that stemmed from this round of matches before having a chat with our special guest this week. We're going to be talking about building a sporting dynasty and are thrilled to be joined by Manchester Thunder head coach Karen Greig for this juicy topic.
Amazing. Can't wait. Let's get stuck in with our first match. Starting off the weekend, we had Thunder versus Rhinos. And for this one, I said, gritty, grit.
Oh, it was such a good one.
We have missed the thrill of a Northern derby in the Super League for the past few seasons, and this one was a cracker. Both teams were level at three-quarter time, but Thunder snatched the win after a rampant final quarter.
Following that cracker of a game, we had Pulse versus Bath, and I've gone for 8-goal half. Oh, this was a disastrous first half from Pulse after showing real signs of improvement in recent weeks, managing to claim the title that nobody wants of the lowest halftime score ever at just 8 goals. Bath, in a completely different league this season, were just phenomenal.
Next, we had Lightning versus Sirens. And for this one, Eve Cobbett on Twitter said, "What's stopping Sirens?" This always looked like it was going to be a juicy matchup, and it did not disappoint. With Ella Clark resting, it wasn't an easy win for Lightning at all, with Sirens showing that they are now one of the big guns. Love seeing this on their socials.
Yeah, that was amazing. So good. Next up, we had Wasps versus Dragons, and I've gone for keep on grinding. Now, this is the Dragons that we can start to get on board with. It's so good to see them stepping up and starting to deliver, achieving their narrowest halftime goal margin of 2 so far this year. If only they were able to grind it out for that last quarter where Wasps were able to double their final quarter score, scoring 18 to Dragons 9.
First up on Monday, we had Mavericks versus Stars. And for this one, I said, absolute error city. As in previous weeks, Mavericks did manage to get over the line, but they are still heavy in unforced errors. Stars also struggling to put out a consistently good performance across all 4 quarters. In total, there were 31 unforced errors across the 48-minute game. Not good enough.
Yikes. Last up for the rounds was Pulse versus Rhinos, and thank you Emma Redley on Twitter who's given us our summary. Rhinos keep charging. This was a really close one. It was such a good game. Pulse came out the blocks firing with their second highest quarter score of the season at 15, but a tenacious Rhino side managed to pull through and capitalise on Pulse's 14 unforced errors compared to their own 7.
Next up, we've got our games of the round. Lucy G, which one have you gone for this week?
Oh, so I've gone for the last game of the round that you just heard the summary for, Pulse versus Rhinos. After an absolute disaster game against Bath, which we shall never speak of again, it was a much better start for Pulse, delivering their second strongest quarter performance of the season so far. They came out full of intent and had much better connections in attack, although it's still not at the level that it should be or the level that we expect of them, I don't think. So Decker in wing attack only had 3 feeds and 3 goal assists in the first quarter, which left Ratu to pick up a big chunk of the work with 2 feeds and 8 goal assists. Between Ziggy Berger, Kira Rothwell, Ellie Ratu and Ash Decker, the average age of that attacking lineup is just 21 years old. And you can see that they're lacking a sort of calm, experienced head in there. And there's also no sign of Adine Thomas. I know I think she had an injury a few weeks ago, but we've not heard anything about her since. So not too sure what's going on there. But I think someone like her is really missing from that lineup at the moment. Rhinos did come back after the first quarter, 6 down, to end the half just 2 goals behind. And they made life so difficult for Pulse, who were really struggling to get over the transverse line and put on enormous defensive pressure. Rhinos really impressed yet again with how cool, calm and collected they were coming back from a deficit. There were just absolutely no signs of panic whatsoever. One thing that stuck out to me so far this season, and particularly in the second quarter of this game, is a really stark difference between how the VNSL athletes will often plead with the umpire during the game if they're expecting a call or if a call goes against them. Whereas particularly in the ANZ and SSN to probably slightly lesser degree, they play to the whistle. Now, Rothwell got caught out here in this second quarter with that plea to the umpire under the post because of the hands-on pressure Keenan was putting on the ball. And Rothwell was trying to force the ball up and she was just looking at the umpire, almost like telling her, where's my call? And nothing came. You just have to get on with it and trust that the umpires will call the game correctly. You know, they have all of that training, they have that development. Just leave it in their hands that they will call it as they see it and stop playing to the umpire, play to the whistle. So I think that was a really big learning curve for her. I cannot give enough praise to the Pulse defensive line. They're just absolutely formidable. But in the same vein, so was the Rhinos attacking unit. I'm somewhat in love with Rhea Dixon at the moment, and her partnership with Grierson Clark and Rushton, that the sort of connections they have in that unit is just beautiful. I think she did get caught out a few times in this game trying to do some shooter to shooter balls that were never really on, but overall she was just brilliant.
Yeah, I agree with you. And talking about a young front line, I mean, Rushton, Dixon, Grierson is a pretty young front line in the same way that you've got for Pulse. So I think Pulse will get there. And what I really loved, as you alluded to with the inclusion of Ellie Ratu in centre, is she was just throwing that ball into Ziggy Berger. I mean, if that ball placement is on, you can find her under the post. And it was so much better this week in terms of accessing Ziggy. And I think that really reflected in the scoreline. But it's now putting that together consistently under that intense pressure. But absolutely fantastic performance from Rhinos this week. I thought that their defensive pressure was outstanding, particularly with Keenan when she came on.
So, Lucy P, which game have you gone for?
So I've gone for the first game of the round, which was Thunder versus Rhinos. And I mean, on paper, this was always going to be a big one with Dan Ryan up against his old side, Northern Derby, all that jazz. We love it. And Alicia Scholes got the start at wing attack, but she went off after 10 minutes in the first quarter and was then replaced by Caroline O'Hanlon. So there is this real question about the midcourt for Thunder. They've got this versatility, but what are they going to do? I actually thought she wasn't doing a bad job. I thought she could have been left out there for potentially a little bit longer. But I guess it comes back to the argument of, do you have your best/most experienced players on the court, or do you have them in their best position? Because I think Caroline O'Hanlon is a world-class centre. I think she's a good wing attack, but I think they've also kind of got that with Laura Malcolm as well. You know, she's a good wing attack. She's been playing international in wing attack, but she's a really good wing defence. So where do you put them? You know, it's that tricky argument. And I think that another thing Thunder need to have a think about is their opening, their first quarter. So they've had 3 quarter one wins so far this season, and the swings in momentum in this game were just crazy. So the first quarter was Rhinos by 3, then it was Thunder by 8, Rhinos by 5, Thunder by 7, which is crazy. I mean, we haven't really seen a game like this in the Super League this far. And Keenan made a massive impact in goalkeeper, and it just looked like a completely different Rhinos team in that third quarter. And the commentary picked up on this as well. Joyce Mavula, we know and love. How many shots in quarter 3? 1.
That's mental.
Exactly. And so that's just a real pressure. And obviously they were even at quarter time. But as we've said previously, what was the real sticking point was those missed shots. So Thunder had 3 missed shots in the whole game. Ellie Cardwell shooting at 100% and from distance. Amazing. Wow. Rhinos had 17.
Wow.
So that is an area to improve on. However, Sienna Rushton, 6 offensive rebounds. So she's getting the rebounds, but they've got to go through first time. And I think that is what let Rhinos down. It was goal for goal until those last few minutes. And then it just kind of started to fall apart. But yeah, absolute stonker of a game. Rhinos responded so well after being down. They just came back into it. And it was just that shooting percentage in the key moments. But I reckon that they will beat Thunder when they next play them. Moving on to our players of the round. So this week, I have gone for Layla Guskuth. And I've actually had to invent a new stat for Layla to demonstrate how amazing she was this week. So looking at turnovers in the Pulse game, 10 from 14 for her side, 71% of the Bath turnovers were Layla Guskuth.
Oh my God.
I think that's insane. I think in the previous games, it has been a little bit more even in terms of the spread of turnovers between that Bath defence. It's always loads, but it's not always just Layla. It's usually a selection of them. But it shows how phenomenal she was in this round. And I think that's why she deserves the highly coveted Quarter Time Podcast Player of the Round accolade to add to her many medals and awards.
That's got to be up there with a World Cup bronze medal for sure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, as we said before in the Pulse game, it was the lowest halftime score this season, and she was just causing havoc. I think she was all over Rothwell, and she actually forced that change to Radaman to come on in the third quarter, and then she just smothered her as well. So I mean, there's not enough words to describe Layla Guskuth. She's got the speed, read of the game, timing, elevation, pure strength. She's got maximum scores on all her Pokemon stats. I love her so much. And also, can we just remember that she did her Achilles at the World Cup fairly recently, and she's also an actual doctor who was working at hospital during the pandemic. I mean, she is just completely amazing. And she said in the post-match interview that she doesn't feel she's quite back to 100%, and that is frankly terrifying.
To be honest, I'm not sure the world's ready for a Layla Guskuth at 100%. If this is where she's at now, at like 70, 80% or whatever, could you imagine? I don't think the world is ready.
Totally. Who have you gone for this week, Luce?
Oh man, I really struggled to settle on a player this week, as I think there's a huge number of people who could easily be crowned player of the round this week, including Fadoju, but we've had her before. But to be honest, like the entire Pulse defensive line could get a group accolade. Amy Flanagan was great. Rhea Dixon was great. But we have spoken about Rhinos a bit. So I've gone for Jazz Odioberin. Now, in the Lightning game, Sam May started off in goal defence, had quite a quiet first quarter, and Lightning were behind, so they needed to have more defensive pressure to stem Siren's flow. So on comes Jazz, and her impact was just instant. The speed and agility that she has is amazing. And she is one of those players that will have an immediate impact on a game rather than needing the time to grow into it. Like someone like Kwashi can sometimes need a bit of time to really go into the game. Jiva Mentor can sometimes be a bit like that. But Jazz will have an impact straight away. So as soon as she was brought on, she really started to shut down the attacking options for Siren. And the way that she was tracking Goodwin was just so effective. I'm not sure whether she forced the change for Neve McCall to come into goal attack or whether Goodwin was being load managed, as Mickey Austin alluded to. That could be a possibility. But she certainly had a massive impact on the Sirens attacking end as a whole. I think she's a real star of the future, and she has just, like literally 2 weeks ago maybe, just turned 20.
Wow.
I mean, she's just so young with so many years ahead of her. And my heart absolutely breaks for the likes of her and Alice Harvey, who obviously would have competed in the World Youth Cup this year, who now won't get that opportunity. But she would have just been incredible in that, no doubt.
Yeah, she made a huge difference coming on in this game. And as a young player, to be expected to come on and step up like that, it just shows what potential she has. And I really hope that we do see some kind of competition for the 21s, this year or next year, to really see what they can do at that top level.
Yeah, like we said on Twitter, you know, if the powers that be, the netball gods are listening, if we can have a Roses A, Roses under 21, the men's team and a mixed team, do like a little tournament in lieu of the Youth World Cup, please, let's make it happen. Hashtag make it happen.
Absolutely.
One of the talking points this week was the number of imports who aren't seeing as much court time as we perhaps expected. The main ones that stick out to me are, you know, Annika Lee-Jones, who started the season as a key feature as goalkeeper in the starting lineup for Dragons. Then she sort of had a little stint in goal shooter, and now she hasn't been on court for the last couple of games. As well as Annika Lee-Jones, we've also got Kawanga, who's had pretty minimal court time, I'd say, and Radaman too, who I thought would be a staple of the Pulse attacking unit. So what do you think the reasons are behind this, Luce?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that go into it. I would say that the pressure of being a star import, for example, Kawanga is the first player from her nation to play in the Vitality Netball Superleague. So that brings with it a lot of responsibility. And maybe it's that extra kind of pressure that means that imports feel that they've got a lot to prove, that they, you know, there's been a huge talk about their signing, that, oh my God, they're coming over. And maybe, you know, she hasn't played at this level before. She obviously impressed hugely at the Netball World Cup in 2019, and that's why she was signed. But there's that expectation, which maybe brings with it another level of pressure.
But the thing for me, though, is that when she has been on court, she has really impressed. So I think she is living up to that expectation, living up to the pressure, but she's just not been afforded the court time to actually demonstrate what she's got. I think as well, another thing that feeds into it is the differences in style. So I'm thinking particularly about Annika Lee-Jones. I think what we found in the games that she has played is that she's often being blown out of the game. She's quite costly in terms of penalties. And obviously she plied her trade in Australia. She was playing in SSN. And I think the differences in umpiring between SSN and VNSL are very notable, very stark differences. You know, that's not anything against VNSL. I just think it's differences in style. So where she is used to playing possibly a lot more body on body with more physicality, that's not being accepted in VNSL. And that's why she's sort of being blown out and therefore she's not getting the court time.
And I think for Dragons as well, they've sort of settled on that defensive unit with Abby Tyrrell and Christina Shaw at the back, and it's kind of working quite well for them. So there's no reason to play your import if it's not working, if it's not fitting in with the unit. And that kind of makes me think of Radaman as well. I mean, Pulse already had Ziggy, who's that big target at the back, with two future Roses shooters in Kira Rothwell and Olivia Tasheen, and obviously Adine Thomas in wing attack. So was there really room for her as a goal attack, wing attack in that lineup? Obviously she replaced Chiara Semple, but then when it kind of didn't work initially with Ziggy, we didn't see a lot more of that combination. And then it was kind of Kira and then Radaman coming on in the times when she was more desperately needed. And I guess we'll see throughout the year how it goes, how much court time teams do give to their imports. But also this is the first year for, you know, all of these three that we've discussed, it's their first year playing in the Super League. So who knows what might happen. They might need a year to bed in, like we've seen with previous players, and then in the future they are that starting player and they're really that go-to, like we see with Rebecca Robinson or Joyce Mavula, Kim Kamain, and maybe we just need to give them a little bit more time.
Next up, we'll be chatting to Manchester Thunder head coach Karen Greig about building a sporting dynasty.
We are delighted to be joined by Manchester Thunder head coach, director of netball and former England Rose, Karen Greig. Thank you so much for joining us, Karen.
Hi guys, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
How are you feeling now we're almost at the halfway point of the season?
It's kind of surreal, really. You know, we seem to take us forever to get to the point where we were starting, and it just seems to be flying by. So yeah, I think we've played 7 matches, so I think we're 1 or 2 behind some of the teams. So we've got a big doubleheader weekend this weekend, which will see us catch some of the teams up. So Yeah, it's been great. Been loving the central venue, even though it is absolutely exhausting. I'm sure many other Super League coaches would agree that we're all shattered. But I think the setup at Wakefield has been absolutely fantastic.
Amazing. Yeah, we've been absolutely loving being able to see every game live. It's just been such a treat. And it's, getting us through lockdown, I would say. And now we're coming out the other side. So it's brilliant. We would love to chat to you today about building a sporting dynasty. So when we were having a look at sporting dynasties across the world, a few teams sort of came cropping up. So the 1990 to 1998 Chicago Bulls was one, the 2001 to 2019 New England Patriots, and closer to home, Manchester United from 1992 to 2013 under Alex Ferguson. Now, we would certainly put Manchester Thunder in this category when it comes to netball. Thunder has been around since the very start of the Super League, and historically, Thunder was and continues to be an absolute force to be reckoned with. We imagine there are a huge number of factors that contribute to a club's ability to build a sporting dynasty, one of which is key cultural values that all members of the club, be it coaching staff, players, volunteers, etc., adhere to. What would you say are Thunder's key cultural values that have helped you to land the title of a sporting dynasty?
I think, as you say, we've been around a long time, and I think what's been key for us is that the people behind Thunder and the people involved in Thunder have been very much the same over that period of time. There's been very little movement, whether that be staff members, volunteers, players. It's been very much same, so everybody knows what it means to be a part of Manchester Thunder, and the culture that is behind us as a team in terms of, we really identify as a family, and it's not just the squad, it's about, the coaching team, the management team, our volunteers, our friends, our families, and we really like to embody that, as we really do see ourselves as a franchise that are a family. And, we've got great people working with us from pathway, year 7 all the way up to the Super League, and and it's really about embodying those people and pulling them in, that they do believe that they're part of the family, and ensuring that we've got the same coaching values throughout as well. Every coach is very different in terms of their philosophy and how they like to do things, but in terms of Manchester Thunder, whilst we embrace those philosophies and the way coaches, we have the very similar values through each age group that we want our players to play to. So, by the time they get to play at Super League level, they've experienced pretty much everything. And when they come to us, they're finished article, we can just look to develop and hone their games. So yeah, I think it's all about trying to stay very compact and keep a similar personnel from year to year.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting you say that, because we picked out a few key names who have been part of the club in previous years and who are real kind of prominent figures in netball, such as Mike Greenwood, Tracy Neville, Dan Ryan, and of course yourself included in there. And we've now got Tracy back as the Performance Operations Director. So what's it like having Tracy back in the fold?
It's been really great. Obviously, I've played with Tracy a long time ago. We obviously came through, Greater Manchester County, North West and England together. So, when we first started working together as coaches back in 2014, I think it was, I retired in 2012. It was completely different. It was tough when she was my coach and I was a player, because obviously you have that friendship as well. So to be able to, go into coach and player mode is quite difficult. And having worked with her from, 2014 in terms of coaching, she probably has had a great impact in terms of my coaching philosophy and how I like to, run things and work things. And, to have her back on board with Manchester Thunder, when I know how passionate she is about Manchester Thunder and how passionate she is about netball, is just great, and she's been a really good pillar for me to be able to bounce things off. Sometimes I think when you're a Super League coach, it can be quite a lonely job, and I think especially in these last 12 months, that's probably been highlighted even more. So to be able to have somebody like Tracy who's so experienced and who is a friend, it's been really good to kind of be able to throw ideas off, ask advice. So yeah, it's been great to have her back.
And what do you think are those kind of key traits or aspects of Tracy and you and other kind of historical Manchester Thunder figures that make you part of that family and part of that unit? Is there a specific key aspect, like is it a personality thing? Is it a value? Is it all because you've come from the local area? What is it that really gets you to be that core Manchester Thunder personnel?
I think, we've all been brought up in very similar ways. You named some names back there, Mike Greenwood and Marion Lofthouse had a massive influence, I know, both on myself and Tracy as well. And I think those core values that we've had from being youngsters, growing up in the Northwest in fantastic clubs that are up here, that do or die attitude, it's that real hard working, that graft, the expectancy to win and the wanting to win, I think is always there. And you see the coaches that we've played under have always been really passionate and have always worked so hard. And I think, the way we like to work is very similar in terms of the work that we put in, the passion that we put behind it, but ultimately the wanting to give back to the netball community and see, the next lot of England players come through and evolve as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was looking at this before the interview, I found how many Thunder players are currently in the top level at England is just phenomenal. So we've got 6 of the Commonwealth Games gold medal winning squad were current or former Thunder players, and 9 of the current Roses, and with so many more coming up through the ranks. Thunder, I also found, a 6-time NPL champions under 19, and you just always hear so much in netball about this strong pathway. Thunder's got such a strong pathway, and we think that's a really key factor in Thunder's success. But what goes into building that strength in a pathway?
I mean, obviously the pathways have only been part of the franchises now for the past 3 or 4 years. Those pathways were actually England Netball. I was one of the original England Netball employees in terms of, those regional pathways, and I ran the Northwest pathways for nearly 9 years. So for me, when I was running that pathway and then Tracy took over as head coach, again, it was that working partnership that we had. So me as an England Netball employee and Tracy as Manchester Thunder, even though it was only our top athletes in our regional performance programme that were coming across and playing for Thunder, it was the connection and understanding of what athletes we already had coming through from being 12, 13. And even though they weren't part of Manchester Thunder, it was them understanding that that was their next step and providing them opportunities to see that how connected those two programmes were. And we've got, as I said, we've got some fantastic clubs in the Northwest. You look at your Oldhams, your Tamesides, Trafford, your Berries, these clubs, and in Cheshire as well, and Lancashire, these clubs are producing some fantastic athletes, and we're really, really fortunate that we've got really good leagues in our youth section as well. And Oldham are renowned to be one of the best young clubs in the country, and have won a hell of a lot of championships there as well. So I think our girls are passionate as well. They're hardworking, and when the franchises took over the pathways 3 or 4 years ago, that was at the same time that I stepped into my role as director of netball at Manchester Thunder. So I actually left the pathway to do that. And I think it was really fortunate and lucky that I knew what had worked for us as a pathway for such a long period of time in terms of producing top quality athletes, producing a lot of athletes through to the England programme. And Shona Forbes came on board with Manchester Thunder as she succeeded me at the regional level. And because we already knew what worked and what ticked, it was all about embedding that into the franchise and putting the franchise's stamp on that as well. So, that started off relatively small with under 17s and under 19s. And we now range from year 7 with our Thunder Bees all the way up to under 21. So our pathway is huge now. We've got something like 200 athletes in our pathway, 26 coaches working across our pathway. And I think what's key for us is our pathway is all about having the best athletes in those programs. It's not a money-making scheme. It's not about, having 100 hubs around and running. It's about having and providing the best quality programs for those best athletes at that age group. And I think that works because of our connections that we have with the counties as well. So we see the counties working really hard, doing what they're doing, and then that connection and that link with us at the pathway level. So it's almost like the counties are kind of running hubs for themselves, but they are our feeder points, and we see them as really key partners for us to be able to run such a successful programme. And we're able to work with 26 coaches in that pathway, and learning and developing them is just as important as developing those players as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. When you have enjoyed so much success like Thunder has, and consistently been a presence within the competition and a team to be feared, how do you cope with failure and not being at the top of the league?
I mean, it's how you measure failure. Like, what is failure? So, come the end of the season, if we don't win the title, hopefully we will, but if we don't, we have to then look at, was it a failure? Or, what have we actually taken out of this year that will help us build for the next 12 months? So I don't necessarily see losing games or losing a title as a failure. I think there's learning in absolutely everything that you're doing, and I think that's the key thing. We lost 2 games a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, we weren't happy. We weren't happy with our performance, but ultimately, it was a massive kick up the backside that we needed as a team, and we've sat down and asked a lot of questions of ourselves as coaching staff and of the players, and we've seen a real injection over the last 2 to 3 weeks that I think is propelling us in the right direction. And we've almost said, right, this is it, our journey begins again. So I don't think you can see it as a failure, to be honest with you. I think you've got to see it as a learning opportunity to push on and make yourself better.
No, I really love that, and it's reminiscent of what Dan Ryan was saying on episode 3 when he came onto the pod about what is success and failure. And although you might not come away winning every single game, what we can see that Thunder are doing is looking, particularly in that mid-court position, you're building a lot of versatility within the players that you have there. And I know there's been conversations about that wing attack position being a particular sticking point, but the fact that Caroline O'Hanlon is broadening her skill set to be more of a wing attack, then you've got the likes of Laura Malcolm who can now cover all 3 positions. Like that's a success in itself. So even if you don't win the games or win the league, there's all of that success within the development of the players and the coaches and stuff like that, as you said.
Yeah, and and the players are learning every session, and they're so hungry for it, which is fantastic. And I know we've been criticised this year, we've not got a wing attack. Well, hang on a minute, Laura Malcolm just played wing attack for England. So are you telling Laura Malcolm she's not a wing attack? Absolutely not. So, as you say, it's about figuring out what players are capable of, what combinations work for us. And, we had a solid pre-season, and these girls are learning all the time, and they've got each other's backs, and they're trusting each other, and they're trusting what we're doing as well.
And it's about as well, when you expose those younger players, you've obviously got very exciting shooters in Berry Neal and Lois Pearson coming up through. And it's about the timing of introducing those guys. And it might mean that maybe you lose 1 game in the season, but then they're ready to win a grand final for you in 2 years' time or something like that. So it's that progression, I suppose, as well. How do you decide when that moment is, when a player's ready to start being sort of filtered in, or is it really case by case?
I think it's case by case, really. You look at our 15 this year, and there's pretty much a split down the middle. I think we've got what you would class 8 senior players and 7, youngsters, really. But we don't see them that way. We see them as a whole squad of 15, and every single one of them is putting their hand up for selection each week. So for us, it's knowing what their skill sets are, knowing what they're mentally capable of coping with, and being able to inject them. And it might only be for 5-6 minutes at a time, but giving them that opportunity to go on, mix things up as well. It gives other teams opportunities to play against our a different starting 7 or a different style, which might just change the game at a key point, and then we potentially could make that change back. So it's all about just injecting them as and when we feel, the game A might need it or a matchup might work. And, these less experienced players are thriving in that environment, and our more senior players are absolutely, you know, pushing them each week, and we're seeing them really develop, and that's our future. And I think it's really important that we have to invest in our future. You know, netball isn't a sport that's lucky enough to have a lot of money involved. So for us, we put a lot of time and effort in as our pathway, which we've already discussed. So I think it's key that there has to come a time where you have to see the fruition of the hard work that's been put in those pathways.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with you. I think it's that progression, isn't it, that really sets Thunder apart from some of the other teams as well, bringing those youngsters in and introducing them so that they're ready. And I was looking at an interview with Andy Harrison, who is actually the program director for the extremely successful GB cycling team. And they, interestingly, have removed all medals, images of previous Olympic Games, and basically any evidence of past historical success from their performance operations headquarters in Manchester. The article I was looking at said that the team had looked at mental triggers that may encourage complacency and have removed them. They said there's no need to glorify the past because the past is irrelevant. I thought this was quite an interesting outlook, and I wondered where Thunder fall in terms of this approach. What do you do within the club to ensure that players, particularly those young ones coming through, bring their best to each game and don't become complacent after success?
I think it's that competition within the squads, you know, and I think knowing that just because you're at Manchester Thunder doesn't mean that you're going to be a winner. You know, you've got to put absolutely 110% into everything. You know, we have, with our youngsters, we look at, we have a parent and an athlete meeting every year, and one of the topics we talk about is entitlement. And I think entitlement is a really difficult one in this day and age, where I think we have to, as a sport, and, you know, not just netball, but other sports as well. It's not just thinking because you are A, at Manchester Thunder, or B, because you turn up to every training session, that means that you are going to be starting 7, or you're going to be a world champion, or you're going to be, you know, it's that sense of entitlement that it's got to be eradicated across the whole sport, really. And I think that's what we're trying to do at Thunder, is making sure that people, if you want to be at the top, you've got to work hard. You know, you work hard every day, not for perfection, but for progress. And I think as long as we're seeing that progress and the players can see that progress, ultimately it's all about the performance, not necessarily the outcome. And I think that's what, you know, we've got to keep in mind, that if we look after ourselves, we're progressing each week, we're putting out good performances, ultimately the results that we want will come. So it's just about staying focused, really, on taking each week at a time.
And I suppose knowing that you want to maintain that reputation and honour the history of the club without, like you say, just getting arrogant that, oh, we know how to win, we know what to do. So knowing how to win, but not expecting it, and knowing that graft needs to go in every day from when you first, you know, are in that pathway to the last day that you leave the Super League. Yeah,
for sure. And you know, I think that's something that, you know, we've been working really hard on this year. We've really knuckled down. The players have lifted the intensity in the training, and they're really pushing each other each week. So I think, you know, the players know that they're not going to get anything gifted to them.
I think that sort of just epitomises why Thunder could be classed as a sporting dynasty. You know, that competition for spaces, there is no complacency allowed. There's no space for it. And then competition for spaces sort of feeds into the strength of your pathway. So those players who've actually made it into the squad, which goes into the strength of your coaches who have made those players strong enough to be selected. And it all just filters down. It's like a big jigsaw that comes together. Yeah. And I think that's quintessential why Thunder could be classed as a sporting dynasty. So when you've had so much success and you do have so much strength across all the areas of the club, how important is maintaining the reputation and honouring the history of the club? Is there a lot of pressure that comes from having all of that history behind you?
I think there is definitely some pressure, because you know, I think people look at Manchester Thunder and expect a certain, you know, certain levels of performance, certain levels of way people behave on and off the court, which is absolutely fine. I think what we've got to recognise is you look at a team Bath now and they're flying. You know, they're playing some fantastic netball, and that's not just taken this year. That's taken a long time to get where they've got with that squad that they've got. It's taken a lot of hard work from the coaches and the players. So, I think that's that recognition of the expectation is that things are not going to happen overnight. It is a building process. So, whilst people can sit there, and say, well, oh, Manchester Thunder have lost, it's that expectancy that we're going to win all the time, and of course I want to win all the time. I'm not in this job to not win, but I look at it and I think the expectancy is definitely there, but it's knowing what our processes are within that, and that things don't just happen with a click of a finger, that a lot of hard work goes into making a championship winning team and what that actually looks like. So, teams in different years are going to go through different peaks and troughs. They're going to go through development phases, performance phases. So I think it's about everybody on the outside understanding what that looks like as well. We know what this season means for us as Manchester Thunder and what we're trying to achieve, but people on the outside don't necessarily know that. So expectations are always maybe a little bit different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Another part of the Thunder dynasty is obviously the huge contribution of your fan base. So we always hear about the atmosphere at the Thunderdome and the drum. And
can't get away from the drum.
Yeah. And there's something about this passion and wild appreciation for the franchise that you don't always see with other netball teams, but you do often see in other sporting codes like football. How much does the Thunder fan base kind of add to the franchise, and how has this been built over the years?
Oh, it's crazy. I love our fans. They're amazing. The proper Northerners, if we can say that, they're passionate, they love the sport and they're competitive. So it's great that they do get behind, and the good old drum. I know some teams are not necessarily happy about the drum at times, but for us, you've got to create that atmosphere, and we want it to feel like a bit of a fortress. That we want our home venues to be a venue that teams don't like coming to. It's sport. It's not going to do a cheerleading competition. We're here to get stuck in, no disrespect to cheerleading, but we're here to get stuck in, and really fight for the win, and to have such passionate fans is great, and we really do see them as our eighth player. My nephew's just turned 4, and bless him, he's not been to a game now obviously for over a year, but he still remembers the drum, and he's got a drum at his own house, and he'll bang his drum and shout Thunder, and he's barely old enough to know what that means. And I think it's really important that we do have people like that. The netball clubs really support us, the counties really support us, and I think those die-hard netball fans from the northwest, I say we've got fantastic clubs, a lot of great netball fans and netball community up here that really look after one another, and it's great to have those behind us. And we've got some fantastic volunteers, and I think valuing those volunteers is really, really important. And they a lot of the time make our match days as well. They get the crowds going, they have the chocolate duck, we've got our Thunder Bear. So yeah, I think I can't wait to be back in front of our crowd, and it's we've really missed them, and yeah, hopefully they'll come back once we're allowed to play back at Bellevue again.
And obviously with the different format in the game and everything being played at a central venue, it's obviously changed the fan experience quite a lot, although obviously we now can watch every game live on Sky. Thank you very much. But have you noticed any difference in the fan engagement in the digital space in the absence of being able to have them in a home venue?
I think the fact that, as you said, Sky has been absolutely fantastic, and the fact that we can go back and watch every game on YouTube for me is just great. My partner hates it because he'll sit and watch our game, and then I come home and make him watch our game again. So he's like, I've got to watch it twice, and I'm like, well, I'm watching it at least 10 times, so twice. So I think I look at it and I think the fact that we can't have fans is obviously devastating, but not a lot we can do about that. But it's out there, netball's out there, and it's free for everybody. And I think whilst we can be disappointed, there's been a lot of talk around, we were on the up, we were getting the biggest crowds we've ever had off the back of the World Cup as well. And will it affect? Yeah, I think to a certain degree it will affect our crowds. But I think the fact now that we are on TV. Every single game is on TV. We now almost are available to a different audience that may not have ever seen netball before. So we're always going to have those die-hard netball fans that will come back and watch. But how many new netball fans have we created over this year purely because it's now more visible? You know, and it's not necessarily just about the fans. It's about sponsorship opportunities and things like that. You know, I just hope that, you know, whilst we wish COVID never had happened, that something really good could potentially come out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Karen. That is all we have time for today, but this has been really, really interesting and just fascinating to hear your insight into Thunder and how the franchise has developed over the years. Go well this weekend. Good luck in the doubleheader and hope to chat to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to episode 8 of Quarter Time. We cannot wait to bring you even more netball chat and another awesome guest next week.
Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media at Quarter Time Pod for the latest netball updates. Don't forget to get involved in the conversation online by tagging us in your 3-word summaries of the game and letting us know which players have stood out for you each week using the story template on our Instagram highlights.
Enjoy the next round of matches and see you next week. Bye.
Bye.